la victoria siempre.
He was the bane of 11 American presidents and outlived 5 of them. His actions drew the U.S. into a disastrous failed invasion and brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. For 5 decades, Fidel Castro had an indelible effect on U.S. foreign policy and domestic politics.
The United States was accustomed to dominating Cuba and most of the other Latin American countries, certainly those in the Caribbean. The rulers were supposed to do what we wanted them to. Castro did not.
Before Castro led his guerrilla fighters down from the hills to depose the decadent and brutal dictator Fulgencio Batista, Havana was a playground for the American jet set, a libertine haven of gambling, gangsters, iced rum, and tropical sex. Castro's communist rule put a stop to that party, expropriated U.S. businesses, and seized private property. The U.S. slapped a trade embargo on Cuba and welcomed a rapid exodus of the island's wealthy and middle classes, who set up a politically powerful exile community in Florida. In the context of the Cold War, Castro's increasingly close ties with the Soviet Union were intolerable to U.S. leaders.
The United States was not going to sit still for that. We were accustomed to having Cuban leaders do what we wanted. Castro obviously was not going to do what we wanted, and so the United States began mounting an effort against him, in other words, the Bay of Pigs.
The invasion took place in April 1961 while John F. Kennedy was president. The CIA, with poor intelligence on the ground in Cuba, assumed the invasion would spark a popular uprising to topple Castro. In fact, Cuban armed forces using Soviet-supplied heavy weapons decimated the invading force. The next phase in the U.S.-Cuban conflict brought the world as close as it has ever been to all-out nuclear war. On October 16, 1962, reconnaissance photos showing Soviet nuclear missile installations in Cuba were shown to President Kennedy. As Kennedy and his advisors held frantic meetings and initiated secret diplomacy, the U.S. military prepared responses, including an invasion force and plans for aerial attacks. On October 22nd, Kennedy gave a somber speech to the American people, announcing a naval blockade of Cuba and warning Soviet leaders old and feeble. In his final years, he appeared a pale shadow of his former self. But he lived to see President Barack Obama reestablish diplomatic relations with Cuba, symbolically bringing the era of Fidel to an end. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Washington.